we worked with Drs. Maertin, Joseph, and Henriksen on a project that studied how weight change affects glomerular filtration rate.
So our hypothesis, as you can see here, is that weight loss in patients with chronic kidney disease stages 3, 4, and 5 will result in an increase in glomerular filtration rate. Now, what is glomerular filtration rate? Why GFR? Well, this is a metric used by nephrologists to measure and assess kidney function in patients. And so GFR is a measurement of how well your kidneys are filtering toxins and waste products out of your bloodstream. Now, for example here, we have stage 1 of chronic kidney disease. They have a GFR of 90 milliliters per minute, that is. And these patients, while they're not at optimal levels, are still relatively healthy compared to stage 5 patients who have a GFR of less than 15 milliliters per minute. Now, with kidney function this low, the toxins and waste products are not being removed from the bloodstream the way they should be. And this results in patients that are incredibly sick and just feel miserable. And so we aim to keep patients in these upper stages for as long as we can. Now, this is very relevant. Here in the United States, we have 30 million adults who have been diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. And there has been some indications in the literature that weight loss can potentially slow the effects of chronic kidney disease. And so that's what we're investigating here today.
So we conducted a retrospective chart review where we analyzed chronic kidney disease patients stages 3 through 5 who were not on dialysis and were seen within the last 8 years. We collected 297 patients who met our exclusion criteria from a regional database, NANI's database, and we analyzed these patients for what we called the greatest GFR disparity. What we mean by this is that we looked for where their GFR, or their kidney function, was highest and where it was lowest, and we used those 2 points as our start and end points. And then at each of those times, we found the weight, blood pressure, and other vital signs that corresponded, and that formed a complete data set for each patient. We then divided the patients into gained weight and lost weight cohorts based on whether they gained weight or lost weight over that time. And we analyzed them using Excel and SPSS to get our results.
Now, our initial results were very promising. We looked at the weight gain cohort, and we took their change in GFR by their change in weight. And now the glomerular filtration rate, the kidney function here, the positive numbers mean that their kidney function improved, and the negative numbers here means that they got worse. And you can see by the trend line here that there is a significant correlation. As the patients gain weight, their GFR, their kidney function, goes down. As you remember from a couple slides ago, a low kidney function is not good.
But when we tried to do the same thing with our lost weight cohort, we couldn't. There was no statistically significant data or result from the data set until we stratified the patients by their stage of chronic kidney disease. So this slide's a little messy, but all it is our gain weight and our lost weight cohorts stratified into each of their stages of chronic kidney disease. And on the left, we're not surprised by what we find, because here we have our stage 3 patients, here we have our change in GFR. Again, a positive number means they got better, and a negative number means they got worse. For our stage 3 patients who gained weight, they had a net decrease in their GFR, so they got worse. This is exactly what Alex said. These two values, while deceptive, it looks like they got better. In reality, they don't mean anything. They're there for completeness, but our sample sizes are 8 and 23, respectively, and this is because by the time patients get to that advanced stage of chronic kidney disease, most of them are on dialysis, and it's hard to find patients who are not, which was one of our exclusion criteria. Now, the lost weight cohort is where things get very interesting. See, for our stage 4 patients, they had a net increase in GFR when they lost weight. This means that they got better. But for our stage 3 patients, we were surprised because they had a decreased value in their GFR, which means that they got worse. And this didn't make any sense, because how did the stage 4 patients get better and the stage 3 patients get worse? So we went to Dr. Joseph, our preceptor, we talked about it, and she suggested that perhaps the drugs that these patients were taking were different. You see, when patients have chronic kidney disease, it means their blood is not being filtered as well by the kidneys, like Alex said, but this results in them accumulating fluid in their bodies. So one of the drugs we can give them to help remove this excess fluid are called diuretics. So we looked at the diuretics for these patients, and this figure shows the average diuretic dosage for our stage 3 chronic kidney disease patients and our stages 4 and 5 patients for Lasix and spironolactone, which are 2 very common diuretics. And we found that they weren't different, that our stage 3 patients and our stage 4 and 5 patients were taking the same amount of diuretics. Again, it confused us. So we went back to Dr. Joseph, and she suggested that perhaps the diuretic dosage might be affecting the patients differently. And one of the ways we could see that is by their blood pressure. So we examine their blood pressure. Again, this figure is a little messy, but the most important thing to know from this figure is this column right here. Here we have the change in blood pressure. A negative number means their blood pressure went down. A positive number means their blood pressure went up. An asterisk indicates that a finding was statistically significant. Now you'll remember on the 2 slides ago that our stage 3 patients were the ones that bizarrely had their kidneys get worse when they lost weight. And they are also the only group that had a statistically significant change in their blood pressure. While the other values may be all over the place, none of them are statistically significant. Only our stage 3 patients who lost weight. And so to explain the significance of this, I want to switch to something a little more graphic. So all this is it shows our patient who lost weight and was on a diuretic dosage, and when they were on stages 4 and 5, and they lost weight, their kidney function got better. This water sign here indicates that the diuretics were likely causing them to lose the weight. And our stage 3 patients, once again, same diuretic, they also lost weight. They also lost their water, but their kidneys got worse. What we just found by the blood pressure indicates that there is something different between these 2 patients. It is very likely that these patients were dehydrated. You see, patients in stages 4 and 5 of chronic kidney disease are sicker, and in average carry more water. So when they're given a dose of diuretics, they can shed the water without affecting the essential blood in their bodies. But in stage 3, they're not carrying as much water. And so when they're given the same dosage of diuretics, they're going to dehydrate much faster, and that dehydrate would be shown by a decrease in blood pressure and a decrease in GFR. So while our results did not make sense, it is very likely that they were confounded by this change in blood pressure caused by dehydration from diuretic dosage.
So to summarize here, our first conclusion is that weight gain in the earlier stages of chronic kidney disease results in a decrease in kidney function. Secondly, we find that weight loss in the later stages of chronic kidney disease leads to kidney improvement.
While those in the early stages of chronic kidney disease who lost weight was confounded likely by dehydration. Now, this was a limitation of our data set because it was a retrospective study, so we did not know how the patients had lost weight. This study will be continued by the Fort Wayne Medical Education Program, FWMEP, under Dr. Maertin in the fall, and he hopes to examine patients who have intentionally lost weight due to lifestyle changes. And we're hopeful that he can eliminate the water loss problem that we encountered and find some more statistically significant results. That is all we have, and thank you for your time.